Hi there, welcome to my channel and welcome to part 2 of my Asylum challenge series. So in the last part I built the Asylum, and in this part I am going to be creating the 8 Sims who will be partaking in this challenge. And I have a particular design and theme in mind for these Sims. These Sims are in no way based on real people, and any resemblance they have to anyone in real life is purely coincidental. That being said, I'll get started designing them. I find it easier to just completely design my Sims using the click and drag tools and everything else rather than trying to find a Sim that looks similar and then building on that, so my process might be a little bit different from yours. That being said, here we go. First up we have Glenn. Glenn is an elder Sim, and obviously he has the erratic trait because all these Sims will have the erratic trait. He's also skeptical, and he is evil. Glenn's aspiration there was expert nectar maker because that's the sort of character that Glenn is. He's the sort who likes to make a little bit of homebrew and do some slightly illicit things sometimes. And Glenn has a very specific look, which I'm going to try to capture here. He's quite noticeably rakish, I guess would be the word to describe his build. Very rigid posture, very tall person. Unfortunately, we can't represent height in CAS, but picture that if you will. Glenn is someone who sometimes just lives in his own little world, has a strange way of thinking and a strange way of operating, and has a very long face. Very long and sort of narrow, pointy face and tiny little eyes and tiny little thin lips. And one of Glenn's key features is those gold hoop earrings, which he is never seen without. Glenn is, as I say, an elder Sim, and I think he's probably been wearing that same pair of gold hoop earrings since he was in his 20s, which was probably almost 50 years ago at this point. Glenn's outfits, obviously he is in the Asylum, so for the most part he will be wearing just the standard white outfit. He will be allowed to have a slightly different outfit for his exercise clothes, for his sleepwear, and for his hot and cold weather wear, just because, we don't want any deaths due to weather conditions or anything else. And Glenn will be sharing the Asylum with our second Sim, who is Carol. Carol is also an elder Sim, and just by the way, that's Carol spelt with a K. Karol. It's not quite Karen. It's very close, and perhaps it might as well be Karen, given what the personality here is. She is obviously erratic, as all these Sims are, but she's also lazy and cringe. What do I mean by lazy and cringe? I mean lazy as in, when she takes her vacation, you will find your workload doubles, because she's left all the work she should have been doing for the last 3 weeks for you to do in the last week of the month. How is she cringe? Don't get her started on talking to you about her experiences using Cupid's Corner. Yes, that's right. Carol likes to use Cupid's Corner. That said, Carol is famous for perhaps her silver highlighted dark-haired look that borders on being a Karen hairstyle. It's not quite, but it almost is. A bit like how her name is not quite Karen, but almost is. She's also got her signature very red glasses that make her eyes look absolutely massive. Something else that Carol is well known and famous for is her love of interesting jewellery. And her aspiration in this playthrough will be the Crystal Crafter, where she will be making some even more interesting jewellery and forcing it upon everyone else in the Asylum, because that's the kind of person that Carol is. She's the kind of person who's going to try to force things on you that are cringe and things that you're not really interested in. Carol, despite being someone who clearly puts a lot of effort into maintaining that short hairstyle and carefully selecting all that jewellery, and despite her advanced years, still hasn't quite mastered how to get her makeup right. She's got just a little bit too much blush on her face, the colour doesn't suit her complexion, but you never quite feel you can say anything to her. Mostly because you just don't want to have a conversation with her. A lot of people say sometimes quite mean things about Carol behind her back. A lot of people say sometimes some quite mean things about Carol to her face. But she doesn't realise because, she's cringe. As I was assigning Carol her Asylum-related outfits, I noticed that the game had given her quite a lot of body hair, because this Sim started out as a male Sim, and I suppose really I probably should have gone in and changed that, but some people have more body hair than others, so I thought I'd just leave it. And that was it. That was the only reason. I just didn't feel like going back in and changing it. It didn't have anything to do with the fact that I feel a certain way about Carol at all. and her laziness and all that work that she leaves for you when she goes on holiday. The third sim in our asylum is Susan. Susan is an adult sim, and Susan is characterised by some of her quite unique physical features. The one thing that is perhaps more notable about Susan than her appearance would be her voice. Because for a woman who is pushing 50, she's got a voice that's more shrill than that of a screaming toddler. Susan is known for having her very long, very dark hair that she still dyes jet black, despite the fact that she is pushing 50 and does have an exceptionally pale complexion. Susan doesn't have any eyebrows because she was a teen and young adult in the 80s when the trend was to pluck your eyebrows, and Susan kind of has quite small features and quite a strange shape of face, but that's just Susan. What she looks like, a lot of people don't really even know, because it's not like she needs to get close enough to you for you to see what she actually looks like, because you can hear her from the other end of the warehouse. That's how much her voice projects. Susan is, of course, erratic. She is also high maintenance and non-committal. Very non-committal, in fact, and if you don't believe me, you can ask one of the many area managers that we've had. Her aspiration is master maker, and if that sounds a little strange, I invite you to step inside Susan's office and take a look at all those cross-stitch projects and diamond painting projects and various other half-effort, half-thought-out crafting projects that she has started and given up on. The fourth sim in our asylum is Michelle. Michelle is also an adult sim, and Michelle is a good friend of Susan's. I'm not really sure why, because the two of them are very opposite, but alas, friends they are. Michelle, like everyone else, is erratic, and her other traits are that she's a slob and she's jealous. Quite an interesting combination, I know. And as you can imagine, her being a slob, it's even more surprising that she would be such good friends with high-maintenance Susan. But here we are. Unlike Susan, who likes to sit and do her various strange little crafts and befriend the area managers, Michelle's an active sim, and as is reflected in her physique there, she enjoys many different sports, and yet somehow is still lazy. Just as you can hear Susan before you see her, you will know if Michelle has been nearby without actually seeing her presence, because she'll always leave empty Mars bar wrappers, crumpled up Starbucks cups, and all her other crap all over your desk. You will always know when Michelle has been by. She just has that sort of presence. Our fifth sim in the asylum is Andy. Andy is an adult sim, and Andy is called Andy Beige because beige is pretty much what he is. Andy is, of course, erratic, but he is also gloomy and paranoid. Gloomy because it doesn't matter what you talk to him about. Even when his daughter has just won a prize in the sports competition and you congratulate him, I guarantee the conversation is still going to be a miserable one, because this man is incapable of smiling. Paranoid because he doesn't want any help. He will not show you how to do anything in case you might be a threat to his position in the company. But he will spend all of his time complaining about how busy and overworked he is. Paranoid in that if he walks into a room and you're in the middle of a conversation, he will think you're talking about him. Andy has a lot of Star Wars memorabilia and seems like he's someone who would have some personality, and as such his aspiration is nerd brain. But don't be confused, Andy is just miserable and paranoid. Our sixth sim in the asylum is Ailish. Ailish is a young adult sim. They are, of course, erratic, and Ailish's other traits are that they are hot-headed and nosy. Hot-headed in that one day you can have a conversation with Ailish and they will seem like a decent and charming person, and another time, randomly for no reason, they will try to literally murder you. Nosy in the sense that when Ailish is in a good mood, they will want to learn as much as they possibly can about you and to convince other people that you are something that you are not. And when they are in a bad mood, heaven forbid you ever speak to anyone else and mention their name, because if you do, they will go running and literally crying to the manager. This is a person you do not want to get too close to. The seventh sim in our asylum is Stuart. Stuart is also a young adult sim, and he, as well as being erratic, is ambitious and socially awkward. ambitious in that he's done quite well for himself in his career, he's advanced to the top very quickly, but socially awkward in that he apparently sacrificed a social life in order to get where he did in his career. Socially awkward in that every conversation you have with him will be incredibly uncomfortable. Expect him to say and do things that really make you wish the ground would open up and swallow you whole. Not only that, being ambitious, he will think nothing of kicking you down and stepping all over you in order to get further in life. Stuart is someone you are going to want to also avoid at all costs. Although that shouldn't be too difficult, because that rusty glow that Stuart has in his cheeks makes him visible from quite some distance away. The 8th and final sim in our asylum is Elgers. Now, speaking of sims you want to avoid, here's another to add to the list. Elgers is a young adult, he is of course erratic, and he is also mean and self-absorbed. Now I know what you're thinking, if he's self-absorbed, he must be good friends with that high-maintenance Susan. Well, actually no, he hates her. He's actually quite jealous of her. In fact, he's the sort of person you really don't want to trust, because a little bit like Stuart, he's the sort of person who will think nothing of using you as a tool or stepping all over you. He's the sort of person who leaves dirty dishes lying around and then complains to everyone else about what a mess you have left there. Elgers is a bully and just generally all round an unpleasant individual. And now that we have our ragtag crew of Sims for this Asylum challenge prepared, it's time to move them into the Asylum and begin the challenge. So for now, I am going to move them in, and I am going to let them just do their own thing, and let's see how this story starts. The first thing I am going to do is assign a bed to everyone, just to make sure that they stay to their own bedrooms, and then I am going to bring them into the house, which is an important step because I need to lock the gate to make sure none of them leave. There will be one exception to this, which will be Carol, because she has the Crystal Crafter aspiration. She will need to be able to leave the lot to collect crystals and metal. But for everyone else, this will be it. And there they go, off into their new home. And now it's time to lock them in place. I'm going to put a couple of packets of seeds into Elger's inventory to allow him to do his botanist aspiration, because he will not be allowed to leave the lot to harvest anything to plant. And already Andy is scared, because of course he thinks people are talking about him. Such typical Andy behaviour. And there goes Carol, being cringe as usual, and it's so bad it's interrupted Susan from trying to prepare them all some food.
Sibi Kiniku Swarspa Nichi Parsife Fro Bin Ibao Slefinash Lamina.
And whilst Susan is embarrassed listening to those crusty memes, Carol thinks she's still got it. How appropriate indeed. And with that, I'm going to end today's episode. We will pick up again next time, where I will be taking control of just one sim, and I will remain that way until I have completed their aspiration. Join me then, and thanks for watching.
Oh!